She heard the front door open at 2 inches the afternoon. She wasn't supposed to be home. 7 months pregnant, Maya had left her doctor's appointment early because the nausea hit hard in the waiting room, and all she wanted was her own bed, her own silence, her own four walls. She eased off her shoes at the entrance, called out his name. No answer. But the voices coming from the bedroom told her everything. This is the story of Maya Osei, as in Osei Capital. As in the investment firm her father built from nothing over 40 years. As in the woman who walked away from a 9-figure inheritance to prove she could love someone who had nothing and discovered 3 years too late that nothing was exactly what her husband had always planned to give her back. Stay until the end. Because what Elliot didn't know, what he never bothered to find out, was who he had actually married. 3 years earlier, Maya Osei was exactly the kind of woman men like Elliot Callahan spent months researching before approaching. She was 29, grieving, and quietly brilliant. Her father, James Osei, had died of a stroke 8 months before, leaving behind a healthcare investment portfolio worth hundreds of millions and a daughter who had no interest in running it. Maya had spent her 20s working as a hospital administrator in a public clinic in Baltimore, the kind of place her father's firm helped fund but rarely visited. She believed in the work, believed in showing up. She was also, in the months after her father's death, desperately lonely. Her mother had died when Maya was 12. Her father had been everything, her anchor, her compass, the person who called every Sunday without fail. When he was gone, the whole world got quieter. She started going to the same coffee shop near the clinic every morning, ordering the same oat milk latte, sitting in the window, watching people move through their lives like the world hadn't just lost its most important person. Elliot sat down across from her on a Tuesday in October. He didn't ask permission. He said, "You look like someone who just lost someone they can't replace." She started crying in a coffee shop for the first time in months. He handed her a napkin and didn't look away. She thought that was love. It was reconnaissance. They dated for 11 months. Elliot said he worked in real estate development. The deals were always almost closing. The investors were always almost committed. He was charming in a way that felt specific to her. He remembered the small things, asked about her coworkers by name, showed up with her exact coffee order when she had a hard shift. He made her feel like the most visible woman in any room. Looking back, she would understand he had studied her the way someone studies a lock before picking it. The red flags came slowly, then all at once. He moved into her apartment after 6 months because his lease was ending at the wrong time. He borrowed money, small amounts at first, always with an explanation, always with a timeline that quietly shifted. When her father's attorneys called about the estate, Elliot always happened to be nearby, always curious, always asking follow-up questions she answered honestly because she trusted him completely. He proposed at the edge of the harbor at sunset with a ring she would later discover was purchased on a credit card opened in her name without her knowledge. She said yes. Her mother's sister, Aunt Ruth, flew in from Accra for the wedding and pulled Maya aside the night before. "I don't know this man," Ruth said quietly. "Your father would have made sure he knew this man." Maya kissed her aunt's cheek and told her she was being overprotective. Told her that love sometimes looked different than what older generations expected. Ruth left 3 days after the wedding, Maya noticed. Explained it away. The pregnancy changed Elliot in ways Maya cataloged in a notebook she kept hidden in her work bag. He started taking calls in the car. He came home smelling like restaurant meals he said were client dinners, but the receipts in his jacket when she looked, which she hated herself for doing, were always for two. He started criticizing her more, not loudly. Elliot was never loud. He was the kind of man who made you feel irrational for noticing something was wrong. "You're hormonal," he said once when she cried after he forgot her midwife appointment. "I can't be blamed for your body right now." She started to believe him. That was the worst part. She started to wonder if the problem was her perception. Then, 3 weeks before the afternoon she came home early from the doctor, she found a message on his laptop. He'd left it open on the kitchen counter. She wasn't snooping, she was looking for a recipe, and there it was, an email thread. A woman named Priya, not a new conversation. Months and months of messages, and in the most recent one, Elliot had written, "She's almost due. Once the baby is here, we move to the next phase. I've already talked to someone about the assets." Maya read it 3 times, closed the laptop, went to the bathroom, sat on the floor, and breathed very carefully for a long time. She said nothing to Elliot that night, or the next day, or the week after. She was terrified and calculating, which were the same feeling wearing different clothes. And then she came home early on a Tuesday in October, 3 years almost exactly after he sat down across from her in that coffee shop, and she heard his voice coming from the bedroom, low and certain, saying Priya's name like a man who had never needed to hide anything. She stood in the hallway with her shoes in her hand and her baby turning slow circles in her stomach, and she finally understood. She wasn't his wife. She had always been his target. She left before he heard her, drove straight to her clinic, parked in the staff lot, and called the one person she trusted without conditions, her colleague and closest friend, Dr. Sonia Marsh. Sonia arrived in 8 minutes, sat in the passenger seat, listened without interrupting. When Maya finished, Sonia said 3 words. "We call Ruth." Aunt Ruth, who had tried to warn her. Aunt Ruth, who had spent 40 years watching the Osei family navigate people who wanted proximity to wealth. Aunt Ruth, who answered on the second ring and did not say "I told you so," not once. "Come home," Ruth said. "Come to me. Tonight." Maya drove 4 hours north. Elliot called 11 times. She let every call go to voicemail and counted the missed notifications the way she used to count her father's Sunday calls, proof that someone was thinking of her. This time the counting felt different. Aunt Ruth's house smelled like cedar and groundnut soup and safety. Maya slept for 14 hours. When she woke up, Ruth had already made 2 calls, one to a family attorney named Marcus Webb and one to James Osei's oldest business partner, Charles, who had managed the estate since the funeral and knew every financial thread that connected to Maya's name. What Charles found, when he looked carefully, took his breath away. Elliot Callahan had 4 prior aliases across 3 states. 2 previous marriages, both to women with family money, both ending within 2 years when the financial schemes collapsed. One woman had lost her business, another had lost her home. There were restraining orders, there were civil suits. There was a pattern so clear and documented that Marcus Webb called it textbook predatory marriage fraud and said it with no emotion at all, the way experienced people deliver terrible truths. "He knew about the Osei estate before he ever sat down next to you," Marcus told Maya. She was 7 months pregnant, sitting at her aunt's kitchen table, and she felt something in her chest go very still, not broken, quiet. "He researched your father's obituary, found your clinic, established a routine in your neighborhood 3 months before your first conversation." The Tuesday coffee shop meeting was not coincidence. It was an appointment only Elliot had on his calendar. Maya pressed both hands against her belly. The baby kicked twice, hard, like punctuation. "What do I do?" she asked. Marcus opened his folder. "You were already doing it when you left. The legal process took 4 months." Elliot was arrested 6 weeks after Maya left, not only for the fraud connected to their marriage, but for similar schemes the investigation uncovered once his pattern was documented. 2 of his previous targets came forward when the case went public. A third sent a written statement from overseas. Together they built something solid, something the district attorney called one of the cleanest fraud cases she had ever seen, because Elliot had been so confident in his methodology that he had documented almost everything. Confident men make careless mistakes. That was the thing about predators who had never been caught. They started to believe they were simply smarter than everyone around them. He was not smarter than Ruth Osei, or Marcus Webb, or Charles, or Sonia Marsh, or the woman who had spent 7 years working in an under-resourced clinic because she believed showing up mattered more than convenience. Maya gave birth to her daughter on a cold morning in February, in the hospital where she had done her administrative residency a decade before. Sonia was in the delivery room. Ruth was in the waiting area at 4 a.m., wearing church clothes because she said some moments required dressing properly. Maya named her daughter Adwoa James Osei, James for her father, Osei first, because that was the name that was going to matter. She went back to the clinic 4 months later. Not full-time, she had also taken on a partial role with the Osei Foundation, which she and Ruth restructured after the case closed, refocusing a portion of its charitable giving toward legal support for women navigating financial and domestic abuse. Practical help. Lawyers, not pamphlets. The foundation was Marcus Webb's idea. Maya made it real. On the day the final sentencing came down 12 years, the judge citing pattern, premeditation, and harm to multiple victims, Maya was in a board meeting. Sonia texted her the verdict. Maya read it, set her phone face down, and continued the meeting. She checked the message once more at the end. Just once. That was progress. In the parking garage afterward, she sat in her car for a moment with Adwoa asleep in the car seat, looked at her daughter's face, her father's jaw, her own mother's brow, 3 generations of people who had loved her before she was born. I'm sorry it took me so long to come home, she thought. Not to anyone in particular, to herself. Then she started the car and drove toward the rest of her life. If Maya's story reached something in you, if you've ever been made to feel like your instincts were the problem, like your doubts were just anxiety, like noticing something was wrong, made you the difficult one, drop a comment. Tell me the moment you knew. Share this with someone who needs to be reminded that trusting the wrong person doesn't mean you can't trust yourself. Hit like if you believe that survival is only the beginning. Subscribe, because every week we tell the stories of women who chose to come back to themselves. You're stronger than what happened to you.